Thank you, sir. So welcome to this week's TOC meeting, where we've got a couple of items on the agenda. So we've got reviewing actions from last week, a review of outstanding PRs, and any other business. So in terms of reviewing actions from last week, it was on me to revise the RFC proposal and add some number assignment steps for approval time. I had a look at that one, but I think, Eric, you've had a few thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah. Lee, I saw some of the changes you added. And thanks for adding that final comment period step too. That looks good. Yeah, I was thinking, I think it still might be a little too front-loaded in terms of the number assignment steps. And even as I was, if we've been talking about having number assignment really happen post-approval when we're actually merging it into the main branch of the repo, we might even structure that as like a different set of steps that really we as the TOC would be performing as the kind of gate to maintaining sequential numbering instead of putting really any of that burden on someone submitting an RFC. So we might even be able to, this is one thing that I think this is some of the machinery even that the build packs group has for their RFCs, like their management system there. They've got a script to auto number those at merge time. We wouldn't have to necessarily build any of that machinery unless we could just steal it outright from what they have. But I think they even have something where they keep that like quad 0 placeholder in the documents. And it was occurring to me that like if they're doing number management at merge time, like they don't even need to do that really. I think that they're even like their tooling is searching for that pattern and replacing it with a number.
Yep.
But it seems like it's probably even easier to insert the number at the start of the document title or something. So, yeah.
Yeah, because that was one of the things I was wondering, do we actually look to script that process? I sketched something out, as a quick and dirty that worked for that one, but then it was starting to consider, are people going to be forking this, and have we got to consider that, and how far do you go? The other question is, should we as the TOC be doing all the merging on this one, I guess? Because if it's only working group affecting, should that just be delegated to the working groups?
I mean, there's that kind of side option about if this is just a working group local thing, it can go in this directory.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that case, maybe the steps would also apply to the working group leads that might be merging that content as well. But again, that's a fairly small group. So we could probably start with a fairly manual set of steps and some conventions around like, making sure you've got the numbering locked or something.
Yeah.
Give a shout on Slack or something like that. And if that proves to be regular enough, we could invest in actually scripting that to say something like, okay, merge this one. Okay, done.
Okay. I think it is probably worth us knocking our heads together synchronously on this one. So I'll have a nosy calendar-wise, and we'll work something out via Slack timing-wise that works for us both.
Yeah, sounds good.
So has anyone else got any thoughts on the RFC process?
I don't care how we number this exactly, but I really think we need to get it in place.
Yes.
I know a bunch of people who want, including myself, who want to submit various things, and we're like, this is great.
I would just take it, and if it's just 80%, it's 80%, and then try it out, and then we can iterate on it. The usual processing.
I would go one step further and say even 70% is enough.
Yeah, perfect is the enemy of good.
I mean, even if we get numbering wrong one time, right, and have a duplicate, then we can rename it, right? It's not that this would be a blockchain, right?
Not yet.
blockchain. Now you're talking. New idea for RFC process. Scrub, we have blockchain.
Yeah.
Next question.
Nope. Okay. So I think that kind of rounds off the review then as well. So I'll note an action for us to catch up on there. Just stick that in quickly. Right, cool. I'll flesh that out later. I know what that means. So the next action that we've got from that one is over to Jan and drafting the communication for the working group leads about the time slots with the TOC.
I didn't get to that, sorry.
Okay.
I need to make a note that actually takes some time.
Okay, I'll carry that one over then. And Chris, how did the update go for the group naming mapping in the Linux Foundation security scanner?
Oh, I have not updated him with that yet, but I'll do that soon.
Okay, cool. I've not been able to log into that, actually. I get GitHub errors occurring on it. I'll take some screenshots and send them over.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, just ping me or ping me and Pranab. We'll get you set up there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that is reviewing the actions from last week. So we've got 3 outstanding PRs that are relevant at the moment. So I'll post those in chat as well. So the first one, which normally I would say isn't a TOC, but removing archive repos from CF-on-K8s working group. As this is removing things, I guess we just want to be sure that it is the right thing to do and we don't end up with anything being orphaned. I haven't had a look, and the 2 that have been pulled out are archived. So I think that one's fairly safe to just say yay on that one. But yeah, I thought just bring it up as a
quick question. Like, yeah, maybe this is a separate thing in terms of life cycle, but like that will like in the end up with quite some archived repos that are dangling, so to say, right, where you don't even know the original location of those.
Yeah, I was wondering about this too.
Maybe for all of those repos, that it's a possible solution is to archive them, and it's worth keeping them around, but still like detaching them from the working group. But in each case, I would ask the question if we should instead delete the repo. Like, why keeping it? If the working group has no interest in it any longer, who else has?
Yeah, it's that open source software. Like, is it polite to, is it better to delete or is it better to archive a thing that you're not using really internally, but is open and therefore somebody could be using for something somewhere and you'll never know? Yes. So I don't really have a preference. I think keeping archived repos in the working group is non-viable because over time structure changes and like you're not going to do the work of making sure that every archived repo in the Cloud Foundry organization has a proper working group owner who then doesn't care about it. So I think I'm happy to dump all the archive repos into a pool that nobody has any organization or knowledge of, or delete all archive repos. I know there's 1 or 2 things that we use or like VMware uses that are archived as like libraries or something. And I'm like, oh gosh, that's interesting. This is an archive repo that I just clicked through. So like, that's just one example of some vendor. I'm sure there's a bunch of them out there and they will come to light when we delete them. Are there other solutions? Can we make them like, I guess you can make them private with very limited access so they're not deleted and you can probably undelete them if there's people care. I don't know. What's the permanency of, we just like repush them if we decide we want them archived rather than deleted?
I guess it's kind of moving to the yank the network cable and see who screams model, which is, yeah.
Yeah, we used to have
difficult.
the attic, right? And we still do probably. So the other option, which I maybe recommend over delete, though you never find out who the real consumers are, is a transfer, because the transfer, the redirect link works right on the transfer. So like nobody notices. It's not really that different than archive, except that you can put them in a pool that you don't have to see when you're auditing the Cloud Foundry org, which I appreciate.
Yeah, that's possible. We had said, you know, the attic was created because at that point, GitHub did not have that archive function. Having said that, it's a bit cleaner to just move them all away from the Cloud Foundry GitHub org, because you don't have to look at them all the time. And there's now, and there will be even more, a tremendous amount of archive repositories. So yeah, that we could use it for that. I would probably err away from deletion just to preserve, you know, work that's been done. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, deleting the repos would leave dangling references from other discussions. And especially in this case where I think the API repo was just consolidated into the controllers one out of convenience. So there's some back references there, at least. Maybe those are less important. But I think there's also some references to that explorations repo where we were working things out last year, but now it's really served its purpose.
Yeah, so maybe moving them is then the better thing to do.
Okay. But yeah, so I'm quite happy with this PR as is to move them out there then. And then who fancies doing the moving them? Who has the permissions to do the moving is the other question.
I mean, I do. I can.
Yeah.
You know, if you give me the word, I can go ahead and I can take that on.
Well, sorry, are we talking about a bulk move of every archive repo? Like, what's
if that's what you all decide we want to do, then I can do that. But yeah, I don't know. Like,
I was just thinking in relation to this PR at this point.
Okay, yeah.
Right. But these are archived repos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we sort of like bulk move them to the attic, if we can bulk move every archived repo to the attic, let's throw out a proposal. We bulk move everything to the attic. Then we say, hey, working groups, feel free to delete any references to anything that's in the attic now. Like all your repos should be not in the attic. If you have anything in the attic, that's because it was archived. You shouldn't really have ownership over an archive repo. So if you need it back, let's resurrect it. Otherwise,
right.
Feel free to delete it. You don't have to go through us if it's in the attic. That's because it's already gone.
There's maybe one interesting aspect that we should at least check. Like if I were GitHub, I might be inclined not to redirect if somebody moves archive repos. But might be a detail.
I think they redirect archive repos just
okay.
The same.
Then everything is fine.
But I mean, that is, yeah. I guess there's a possibility that they wouldn't have that. I don't know why they would opt to not have that feature in archive repos, since they're very good about redirecting for most repos.
But then, like in the future, there's going to be one huge YAML file that describes the Cloud Foundry org, right? That's what Reuben is working on. So I guess from a lifecycle point of view, that is going to be a PR that should come from the working group to actually get those into, like to have them close the lifecycle, including moving them over. Kind of like, I mean, a bot will move them over, but to request the moving over.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, like, okay, if there's one YAML file that represents the active Cloud Foundry repos, then it's a deletion.
Yes.
On that YAML file, because like now you don't care about it anymore, and then it gets archived or something. Like a YAML file that describes the set of repos in the Cloud Foundry org does not describe how you exit.
That's true.
It would describe it if we kept them potentially as archived in the Cloud Foundry org. You'd be changing a state in that YAML file, which I'm fine with. I don't like the combination of that with the attic. So like, this is an interesting TOC decision that we should make about whether we want to attic or whether we want to archive, it doesn't probably matter that much, but it'd be really nice to like have one way of doing it. And if that way needs to be compatible with this YAML file, I don't know, I guess archived is better. It just means you're going to have a really large file compared to a smaller file that it describes only the things you care about.
I mean, overall, I like the idea of having wherever the repos are living, having them be archived, because that gives you a much clearer in-band notice that this thing is not active at all anymore.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's just do we move them out of the cloud? I'm not saying we shouldn't archive them in the attic. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, so I guess with that one, we could do with some input from Reuben about any thoughts on how the bots could cope with this, and therefore what the right way to do it is.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to cope with a transfer. So like, if we want this to be fully automated, I guess we should stay away from the attic pattern. We should move the attic back into Cloud Foundry.
Move all the attic repositories back into Cloud Foundry?
That would be the way. Like, let's check with Reuben. But I mean, it doesn't make sense that this bot automation is going to be able to figure out that an exit of the org strategy. So like, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, the bot, we need to give the bot like owner rights over both organizations, and then it could do transfers itself. That's a pretty, destructive power, but I guess that could be set up that way. Or it could, send out a reminder to people to please transfer this repository or something. I
think it could do the transfer, right? Everything that gets deleted there gets moved to the attic.
Yep. I mean, if you gave that bot admin rights over both orgs, it should be able to do a transfer via API.
I mean, it has admin rights for the Cloud Foundry org already, right? Like,
right.
That's,
so
that's the highest privilege it has.
Yes.
It's not going to be the attic permissions that will form the highest privileges. But
I mean, then there's also the question of what we do. So at this point, we've, I think, transferred most, if not all, of the repositories that are going to be transferred out of the incubator. So do we leave those repositories archived in the incubator, or do we transfer the entire incubator over to the attic as well? I mean, there's that cleanup aspect as well that kind of, I'm not quite sure what the best answer is.
I don't know, like, I think from what we decided is that like we won't care for the Cloud Foundry incubator org, right?
Right. The whole thing
that's different from the Cloud Foundry org. That's an org we care about. And that's like why we might want to be like cleaning up things. And there will be in the future new like decommissions of GitHub repositories.
Right.
So this is something that we will need also in the future. So I wouldn't care for the incubator, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. We can just once we do a full audit of that, if there's anything left, like that is one thing that's I think we should do at some point is go through the incubator, all those repositories, and archive them at the very least. But maybe there's a few more that should be transferred over that are just kind of slipping through the cracks. Maybe not, but we should do that. But yeah, that's less important than the Cloud Foundry org.
Do we already give out a recommendation to all the workgroup leads to migrate over from Cloud Foundry incubation to? Yeah,
that's happened. I've already done migrations, I believe, for most of those. So I think that's already happened.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a few stragglers that should be preserved. I'm sure there are some things in the incubator that are archived or no longer being maintained, but are still in use by some people, right?
Okay.
Sure,
I have at least 2 repositories. I will then take care for moving them over.
Yeah, even coming back to the original PR that started this discussion, that Irene controller repo is still in the incubator. So that should get moved over too. To the main Cloud Foundry repo since it's active.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just, Jan, you're primarily concerned about kind of building up an unbounded amount of repository cruft in the main Cloud Foundry GitHub org. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's not too bad, but like, it's maybe it's interesting for if you want to have that kind of automation in some kind of reconciliation fashion, right? So that it works like without keeping too much state. And this might be important to not have too many things it doesn't know about lying around. These kind of things. It's probably not very important. Like, although I actually don't know if there would be even some legal things, right? If there's, I don't know what, copyright infringement in the old code base, maybe keeping these old things around isn't a good idea, but I don't know that. That's a standpoint that the Linux Foundation would probably have to clarify. Hopefully there is no such infringement.
Yeah,
there never was, but I don't know, right? And this would now be in repositories we don't even care about. Then that would be a bad thing somehow. But anyway, that's not too.
But an analogy would be that like VMware helped us recently audit all the pivotal open source repos, and they had a whole bunch of, they're like, hey, you know what, everything needs a license, everything needs a contributors file, everything needs a whatever, everything needs a code of conduct, everything needs a bunch of stuff. And if it's archived, it still needs one or two of these things, but not all of them. And so like, I imagine that's a fairly standard. So that's a good reason to get rid of stuff eventually. Though I still think if you have an attic org, you can kind of say this org doesn't obey any of these rules. This org is a set of things that is guaranteed to not matter. And anybody who has a reference to one of these things is screwed. And they can tell because of the name, but I guess the redirect is how they get you. You don't even know you're vendoring in some Go module, right? You don't know where it is.
That's where it kind of, the moving between the org sidesteps the yanking the network cable and seeing who screams.
Right, the network cable reroutes itself automatically after you yank it out. It goes to the backup, it's bonded. I don't know.
Well, I think this also seems like an area that we can just pay attention to as we roll out more of the automation and see how painful it is to manage the archive repos, how much of the existing estate falls into that anyway. Yeah.
Okay, that seems reasonable.
It also seems like something that we could just be aware of and move things over manually or in batches periodically. Again, if we're concerned about the even potential risk of trying to automate the transfer operation across the two organizations. I mean, we're not going to be generating like dozens of archive repos a week on a continual basis. There might be a big burst of them as we finish this cleanup.
Yeah, it seems perfectly reasonable. Okay. So the next PR we've got to look at is adding the repo for CredHub BOSH Release to the scope of the infrastructure working group. Which is one that you were going to have a look at, David.
Full screen Zoom. I'm on my laptop, right? So full screen Zoom on the Mac. I can't find the window ever. I'm like trying to go back. Yeah, repo for CredHub BOSH Release to the scope of the infra working group. Yep. I haven't started this. I'm sorry. I'm stuck at home. School's been closed for a week, so I'm stuck at home with a bunch of children all the time. That's just excuses. But remind me, I can send an email today. I'm working today. So remind me, our desired outcome is that we think this should move, but it is currently in the VMware intellectual property list for some reason, that legacy reasons. So our desire is to transfer it into the Cloud Foundry org. True? Just making sure I remember.
That's what we agreed.
Great. Okay, that sounds very reasonable. I can't imagine this is going to be easy because it's a big company, right? Like, I mean, even Pivotal would be like, whoa, you want to transfer intellectual property out of the company? As long as you've gone through these 50 different checklist things and had these 6 VPs sign off on it, you'll be fine. So I imagine I'm in for a long process, but I can own that process and I'll get it started. And maybe it's very efficient and easy. too, if I explain that it's basically a mistake.
Okay.
I know some people in our open source office too. This will be, so I'll at least get it started right now while we're hanging out.
All right, cool. And then the third and final PR for this week is adding the repo for credit. No, it's not. I've got the wrong one, haven't I, on screen?
This is the community experience working group one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got the wrong one on the screen. It is community experience working group. I did see that there've been some traction.
Yeah, so finally got some engagement from Greg and Amelia. And given the number of docs contributors that are active right now, they're more on board with subsuming this under the existing working groups. So Lee, why don't you put down an action item for me to draft a separate PR that's amending their working group charters to include documentation as a new area for those and foundational infrastructure.
Okay.
And then we can discuss the details of that.
Okay, that's cool. All right, so that is all the PRs that we've got. So have we got any other business? No? Okay. So we've got some actions for the coming week. So myself and Eric are going to find some time to work together on the RFC process proposal. Jan's going to find a bit of time to draft the communication to working group leads about time slots for the TOC on an 8-weekly cadence. Chris is going to update Pranab on the working group names, and Eric's going to draft a new PR for the working groups affected by the documentation changes. Have I missed anything? Oh, cool. All right. Well, have a wonderful week all, and I'll catch you in the not too distant.
Thanks, Lee.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, thanks.
Bye, everyone.
See you. Bye-bye.